The gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would just say in response first to Mr. Biggs' argument of why not just pass the amendment, even though it's irrelevant, it's responding to an issue that doesn't exist, what's the harm? Well, I mean, we have a very important piece of legislation before us that's intended to respond to a real problem. I don't think we ought to spend lots of time on imaginary things. And just in case there's any question about it, no matter how often our colleagues try to make the claim, there is in fact no such tag as it relates to parents. Not only do we have the sworn testimony of the Attorney General of the United States, but we have the actual memo, the big explosive email that says, in fact, doesn't contain the word parent. And it says instead that in order to address a spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff, goes on to say we share an obligation to ensure all individuals are able to do their jobs without the threats of violence or fear for their safety. And it goes on to say that we have to discourage and identify and prosecute those who use violence, threats of violence, and other forms of intimidation and harassment pertaining to this threat.
Well, the gentleman
So
yield.
this has to do with threats of violence. Now, if you still have any question in your mind as to whether or not this bogus claim that parents are being tagged when the Attorney General of the United States said no under oath, when the letter itself doesn't even contain the word parents, I have a third piece of evidence for you to consider. And the title of the fact check is FBI is not using threat tags on parents who protest at school board meetings. They go through it and say it is completely false. So this is an interesting made up thing. I know it's proved to be valuable politically. It will be played on Fox News and you'll all raise money from it. The fact of the matter is there's no basis in fact for this claim.
Would the gentleman yield?
This amendment is silly and there's no basis in fact to take up the time of this important committee on an issue that doesn't exist.
Would the
So
gentleman
let's
yield?
vote it down and be done with it. I don't know if any of my colleagues, Mr. Raskin, I'm happy to yield to you if you have any additional thoughts.
How about me, Mr. Cicilline? Would you?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Cicilline, for yielding. But I would like to pose a question to you, Mr. Cicilline, which is, this was really not an issue to begin with, as you point out. There was no witch hunt going on against parents in any way. There was an apology made immediately, it was retracted, and yet some people are making a bigger deal out of this than January the 6th. Some people are making a bigger deal out of this than Vladimir Putin's invasion of the Ukraine with the encouragement and cheerleading of Donald Trump, who called him a genius. What is behind this obsessive, ridiculous focus on a non-issue?
I thank the gentleman for the question. And, I think what is particularly disappointing, and I think it's very clear, sadly, that our friends on the other side of the aisle have seen some political value, have seen somehow arguing, as all of us would strongly be against, that parents shouldn't be somehow involved in the education of their children. And in fact, they can be tagged as terrorists for attending a school board meeting. Well, everyone would think that's a crazy idea. And of course, everyone's against that. But to the extent they can make the bogus claim that the Attorney General of the Department of Justice is tagging parents as terrorists for going to school board meetings and either protesting or sharing their views about the upbringing of their children, I mean, it would be a very potent political argument against a candidate if in fact were true. So I sadly think it's clearly not a real issue. By all of the analysis I just presented, it's not in the memo, it's not the position of the Attorney General of the United States, it's been fact-checked by an independent source. But the only thing I can think of is that they think if they keep saying it, that somehow it will become true, like they keep saying, all Democrats are defunding the police, but that's just not true. So I sadly think, we're getting close to an election. This is about a desperate attempt to regain power so they can, proceed with agenda that I frankly.
Could I ask you, if I could ask you one other question, Mr. Cicilline, because I know you're the student of this kind of political rhetoric. But look, there's a deadly serious issue here, which is real violence that is killing real people in churches, among African-American parishioners in South Carolina, among Jews in Pittsburgh, in the Hispanic community in El Paso, Texas. Across the country, nobody is safe from this, and it came right here on January 6th. Why would people want to be distracting us with these irrelevant issues at this point?
And because so many of our colleagues have remained silent and haven't even condemned the activities. Some have described them as just tourists visiting the Capitol. So I think that answers the question. Yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired.